Hello and welcome to the Astro Garden, a place for astrologers to chat all things astro. I'm your host Janessa of By Jove Astrology. Thanks for tuning in. All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Astro Garden. Today I have Kira Ryberg here with me. Thanks for joining today.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I feel like we talked about doing this a long time ago, so now it's fun that we get to sit down and finally have this chat.
Yes, I love it. And we talked about it so long ago because you just recently had a baby. So
Yeah.
congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Big adjustments all around, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, big time. Changes your whole life and changes the way you practice astrology and work and everything. So yeah, it's a major adjustment, but it's really amazing.
That's awesome. Yeah, I hope maybe we can get into that just to hear how it's changed for you as we go.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I'll let you maybe introduce yourself. Maybe just give like a brief introduction of like your work and what you like to do and where we can find your work.
For sure. So I'm Kira. I'm a professional astrologer, mostly Hellenistic based. I've been doing consultations since 2020, studied with Chris Brennan primarily, and then I've done, the whole slew of lectures and self-study and books and all of the things from all of the people. And yeah, my practice has really just evolved. I write a lot, so I've written a couple, guidebooks on different subjects. I really love getting into kind of the parts of astrology that are maybe not discussed as much, like the lots and the bounds and the decans and all of these things that to me help you tell the story of a chart beyond just planet signs, houses, aspects. And yeah, I teach, I have lectures and do consultations and do the whole thing right now.
Yeah, I think I came across your work on Astro Twitter a long time ago, and I actually booked your Acorn reading, so that was like how we officially met. But yeah, I cannot say enough good things about your work. I feel like it's very unique, and like you were kind of like the one. Obviously, Austin Coppock wrote 36 Faces and like has done a lot of Decan stuff, and there's other people too that I'm sure I'm forgetting, but like in my mind it's like you are like the Decan queen and like I've really brought that back into like the conversation, and it's just really cool that you've kind of found your little like niche, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the Decans are just so juicy. They're so interesting, and they just take, I think, anything in a chart and bring it to life. And so I first learned about them from Austin, and then I kind of went on my own journey with them, and I started writing pieces on each of the Decans for my patron page, and then that became a guidebook, and it's kind of just evolved from there. But every time I think I'm done with them, I get pulled back in, and they're hard to get away from. They're just so good.
Yeah, there's so much there, and it definitely adds like that more personal layer, like you're saying. I think that's nice to bring in the nuance for like everything, and then you've added another layer now with like your bounds work, so
Hmm.
pretty cool.
Yeah, that was where I was like, okay, maybe I'll step away from the Decans for a little bit and get really into the bounds. But I kind of wrote them alongside each other because I was writing both like essays on the Decans and essays on the bounds for my patron page, and I was doing like ones. They were kind of co-written side by side, and then I kind of put the bounds away because I needed to finish the Decans guidebook, which is like changing all of those essays, and the way they start is very, very different from the way they finish. And so I have to like rewrite 7 or 8 of them so they feel like as good as the final ones that I've written, because it takes like a year to write all of those. And then the bounds, it kind of ended up being like, oh, but the bounds and the Decans, they go together. You can't separate them. And the bounds tell you the tools that a planet has for the Decan storyline that it's engaging with. And it just felt like this really beautiful marrying of these minor dignities in a way that even if you were to just look at that, I feel like you'd get so much information about a planet or a lot or an angle or whatever it might be. And it just is so, yeah, it's so interesting to tease apart. And I feel like it's the stuff when you bring it into like a consultation or you talk to people about it that they're like, oh, whoa, like, I didn't realize that it could get this specific or this personal, and it's really cool to give people that kind of aha moment when you start like peeling back the things that aren't necessarily just like you can find them on, a Google search or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think my reading with you was in summer of 20, was it summer of 23, I think. So a little over a year ago, but that's like, and I've had other readings since then and they've all been great, but like that is the one I keep coming back to with like my
Oh,
inspiration. And like your acorn reading deals a lot with like, maybe you want to you could probably explain it better than I could if you want to do
sure.
that.
Well, I'm so glad that you keep coming back to it. They're my favorite readings to give. It
Yeah.
started because I was obsessed with a lot of spirit.
Hmm.
And all I wanted to talk about was the lot of spirit and people's purpose. And then it was really about the lot of spirit decan and the ruler and the ruler's decan and kind of digging into how this illustrates someone's purpose. Now it includes the bounds and all of these other things, but it essentially is based on James Hillman's acorn theory, which is that the acorn is always destined to become an oak tree, even when it doesn't know it. And we are all acorns that are growing into a magnificent, beautiful oak tree. And we all have a destiny and a purpose and a meaning why we're here. And sometimes it feels like we have no idea what that is until, the acorn comes and kind of like starts growing or knocks us on the head a little bit. And so the reading is to help people get closer to understanding what their purpose is, but usually people already know, and it's kind of just like a homecoming where it's like, you knew it all along, you were right, and it's just like it's a really fun thing because it's like there's always like that part of you that's aware. It's usually the thing that keeps, you keep coming back to it even if you've tried to run away from it 100 times, or those things that are kind of always that thread that's following you throughout your life. And so yeah, they're such meaningful consultations, I feel like, because in a natal reading, we'll talk about stuff like relationships and career and money and all of these different things, which are super, concerning for most people. Like we want to know about those topics. But I think when we peel all that back and we just get to like, what's your soul doing here? Like to me, there's something really amazing about that as just a offering in and of itself. So yeah, it's like a deep dive on the lot of spirit and its ruler, and it's just really fun. I really love it.
Yeah, it's so inspirational. It's just like there's such a wealth of information in it. Like I'm planning to go back and be like, this is how I need to like brand my for me, like it tied a lot to career, and like I have a
Yeah.
lot of ideas that I want to use for branding and for, I don't know, just moving my work forward. It has been like a guiding light. So I
Oh,
love
that
it.
makes me so excited. You don't have to share it now, but like I would love to hear
Yeah,
when you do
yeah,
the branding stuff, like where that goes for you, because that's really
yeah,
cool.
yeah. I'll keep you posted on how that goes. But
I would
yeah.
love that.
So I feel like we've already been talking about it, but I wanted something that popped into my mind is maybe we should explain for listeners who are newer to astrology what the decans are and what the bounds are. So like the decans are divisions of where a sign is divided into three parts of like 10 degrees each. Is that a
Hmm.
great description? And
Yeah.
then the bounds are a little bit funkier, right?
Yes. There are also subdivisions of the zodiac signs into, well, there's a bunch of different rulership schemes, but the most common one is the Egyptian terms or the Egyptian bounds. Terms and bounds are interchangeable. And so they're divided up by all the non-luminary planets. So Mercury, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and Venus. And they get various degrees. It's very mysterious. We don't know why the ordering is the way it is or why some get like 10 or 12 degrees in the sign and some get 2. So they're very very mysterious, but they date back a really, really far ways into like Babylonian astrology even. And so they're, yeah, a little bit funkier. They're not as orderly or neat as the decans, but they're really cool to use together because the decans, kind of like I was saying before, they're stories. They're like, what story is this planet engaging with? And then you can bring in the other elements like the house and the aspects and all of that good stuff. And then the bounds, in my opinion, give you the tools that a planet has to work with to kind of engage with the theme or the story that the decan is speaking to. And so when you start layering them, you start realizing like, oh, I see why like you need these tools for this story, or how when you have this set of tools or this set of tools in this one story, it's going to change how a planet is responding in a really interesting way. So yeah, they're just ways to get a lot more specific, a lot more nuanced. Yeah, I can't get enough of them.
Yeah. I love that they add another way to like get some secret dignity into a chart personally from a chart that's not super dignified. Both the decans and the bounds really add, like for me, they add some dignity or like some more communication, that like secret communication that planets can have, which is really nice when you're working with a chart that doesn't have it on the surface. So
Yeah, and it can be really, almost like a relief. Like I literally had a client this morning who had a planet in its own bound and decan, and they were saying, yeah, I've had a couple of readings and everyone told me like this planet is really weak in my chart because it's otherwise it would be peregrine. And I was like, no, like that is not. And the more that we talked about it, the more we realized like this planet is ruling her life, like it has a lot of power. And I think especially when they start stacking like that, like you get bound and decan, it feels almost just as powerful as a planet in its own sign. And if you read, ancient texts like Dorotheus or Firmicus or whatever, they'll tell you that a planet in its own bound or decan is just as powerful as a planet in its own sign. So yeah, it's like a secret or not so secret form of dignity that can be really supportive for people. And it's nice when you find that out because it can kind of explain why a planet is maybe doing better than you would anticipate, or maybe doing worse than you would anticipate if it's in like a malefic bound, but it's in its own sign. Like there might be some struggles there that you'd be like, no, this planet's just, doing great, it's in its own sign, super happy. And then all of a sudden it has like malefic tools to work with. And it's like, feels mismatched for the job. And that can also help explain why a planet is like that. TM.
yes, I love that. So why don't we also talk a little bit about how did you find your way to astrology? Like, how did this all start for you?
A loosing of the bond.
It's always that, isn't it?
It is, yeah. For people who don't know what that means, it's a timing technique called zodiacal releasing, and there's essentially this thing called a loosing of the bond, which signifies like a major turning point in someone's life, and it's almost like if you're walking in one direction, the loosing of the bond kind of like picks you up and throws you in the other one. You start going down a totally different path. And for me, it was I had kind of just graduated. I was starting to look for, a career. And then I had this friend who wanted to start a podcast about tarot and astrology. And I was getting into tarot and, like witchy stuff. And I didn't know much about astrology at all beyond like what most people know, like I'm like, oh, Mercury's retrograde and things like that. But I wasn't like into it. And she was really good at tarot. So I was like, I don't understand why you want me to do this with you. Like I have nothing to offer. She's like, I just feel like it's like should be with you. And so I was like, I guess I'll like just learn astrology, having no clue like what I was getting myself into. And so I just picked up, like an astrology book, started reading, and then it was like the rabbit hole that I never got out of. And obviously that podcast is not around anymore or anything like that, but it kind of led me down this path. It, brought me to the astrology podcast and like taking Chris Brennan's courses and all of these things. And I didn't want or dream of becoming a professional astrologer. It kind of happened to me where I had a friend who they texted me and were like, can you tell me what my boyfriend's chart means? Like little things like that when you're learning. And I was like, sure, like, which I ethically probably wouldn't do now, but I was like, at the time, I was just like, yeah, hee. And kind of like responded with just like a bunch, like, 10 things off the top of my head, just looking at the chart that like super basic stuff, you know. And she was like, "Oh my God, this is so accurate. You need to be doing this. Like, you're really good." And I was like, "No, no, I'm not. Like, not at all." And then, unbeknownst to me, she offered my services to like her group chat, and two of them were like, "Yeah, I want to do it." Like, and she was like, "I have two clients for you," and I was like, "I don't like, I'm not ready. Like, I don't think I can do this." And she was like, "Just charge them both $20." Do something like do a report or something like this and just see what happens. And then I did that and they both went really well. And then those two people started recommending me and then it just kind of spiraled from there. And like here I am today and I'm like, look back on that. Like, how did that happen? You know, those like I wrote like 10-page reports that took me, I don't even know like how many hours to write those things. And I'm like, that's where it all began, you know?
That's amazing. Everybody needs a friend like that just like, yep, you're doing this.
Yeah, she pushed me off the cliff. And I always tell her, I'm like, yeah, you know, like you're the one who got me into this. And she's like, no, I'm not. I'm like, yes, you are. You started my whole career basically, like unintentionally with just one text to your group chat. So yeah, and it's just like the nature of losing the bond, right? Like you think, like I thought I was gonna go get a career in like social media marketing, and then this just started happening. And I was like, I wonder what would happen if I just did this for a year and kind of saw where it went. And then, you know, it took over my life.
That's so cool. What was that first book that you went out and got? Do you remember?
It was like a PDF on my phone. I think it was like Astrology for Yourself or something. It was not, I don't, you know, it was
Usually,
very, yeah, it was very basic. It was like, you know, me learning modality, like is a cardinal fixed or mutable, like these things where I was like, I didn't even know. I thought they were just signs, you know. You start learning about like the qualities, and I'm like a avid note taker, so I'm just like typing away on like my Google Doc trying to get like all of the information down. And then, you know, I think very quickly after I discovered the astrology podcast, and then I was just like full blown Hellenistic study of fate and fortune, Demeter George, you know, all of the kind of classic books that are in that tradition. And it really went from 0 to 100 very, 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 very quickly. I think everyone in my life was looking at me like, "You're doing what now? You're an astrologer?" And I was like, "I guess. I mean, that's what we're doing these days, you know."
I feel like that's something we all have to do at some point. I feel like just, yeah, you're doing what now? It's like, I know, I didn't think this would be it, but here we are.
Yeah, and it's like it's a weird thing because I feel like astrology is very controversial. You know, people have one of two reactions where they either think you're like stupid and know nothing and like don't believe in science, or they're like super interested. They're like, "Tell me everything about myself." I'm like, could we have a middle ground between those two reactions? Because I don't want to read your chart right now, and also I don't want you to think that I have like no rational faculties in my mind either. But you know, maybe someday.
How was that then? Like, was your family pretty like, and friends, were they pretty into it or supportive or just kind of like do whatever you want to do?
Yeah, I think I got really lucky with having like supportive, like I can't even imagine what it was like to be my husband when I was like, I think I'm gonna do astrology. And he's just like, okay, whatever you want to do. I was like, give me a year, like let's see where this goes. And like after a year, it was clear that like I could do this, you know, like professionally and like earn enough money off of it to have it be basically what I would make it like a, you know, social media marketing job within a year or two. So I was like, all right, let's try that. And I think my friends were a little bit just like one eyebrow raised, like, you're doing what now? But we're very supportive. And my family is also like kind of woo, you know, not overtly woo, but in the way that I tell them, like my dad texts me and he'll be like, what are the planets doing? Like my life is fucked up. Like what's going on? Like, I just had to teach him about like what a Mars retrograde means the other day. And he's like, how long does this last? And, you know, so they're kind of like that, where I think once they saw that I was really happy and I found something that felt really meaningful and purposeful for me, they're like, if you can do that and make a living off of it and you love it, like who are we to tell you not to go for it. And I felt really lucky because I know that that's absolutely not everybody's experience. And some people, run up against a lot of backlash from like people that they're close to. And yeah, I just feel like I had a lot of support even when people were kind of question marking it a little bit. It was still like globally good for you, like we'll see where this goes. Now everyone's like, I can't believe you did that. And so it's worked out.
Yeah, I love that. I love that your dad texted you about the planets. That's
so cute. It's just like, when are Venus and Mars gonna stop fucking my shit up? I'm like, I'm done. I'm sorry. Can I guess on this? I was like, I'm so sorry.
Please.
I'm so sorry, Dad. I'm like, you don't want to know how long Mars is gonna be messing your shit up for. Like, it's a good long while. He's like, oh, you didn't tell me that Mars is a problem too. I thought I was just worried about Saturn. And I'm like, it's so funny. It's really cute though. It's like, it shows me he's interested in what I'm doing, and he takes stock in it. Like all of my family have gotten readings from me at this point and like want to know, around their birthday, they're like, what's coming up for me? And it's nice.
Totally. That's so awesome.
It's
So
cute.
are you going through your Saturn return right now?
I sure am. Yeah, it's like my Saturn's at 11 and I think Saturn's at 12 right now stationing. So
Oh yeah.
yeah, I'm basically like in it. I'm really in it right now.
How has that been? Like, that's so, I can't imagine, because I came to astrology after mine, so it's got to be super interesting going through it, like knowing what a Saturn return even is.
Yeah, I think because I got into it, in my early 20s. And so I was just kind of staring at my Saturn return, like with curiosity for a while. But I kind of had like a prelude to my Saturn return because I'm a Gemini rising. So I had Saturn moved through Capricorn and Aquarius. I have a stellium in Aquarius, which I just felt like was the buildup because it's my sun, my moon, and my chart ruler and my midheaven. So I had Saturn through Aquarius, and then my Saturn return starts after getting like all of this Saturn for so long. And yeah, I mean, I became a mom, obviously. My business has like kind of moved into a new like level of visibility and things like that. Like I went on the astrology podcast and that kind of like blew things up for me. And there was just like a lot of things that were happening all at once, it felt like, which was like I was pregnant when nobody knew I was pregnant when I filmed that. And that it was like really late my time because of the time difference. And like I hadn't eaten dinner and I could just like feel the baby like being angry inside of me. And I'm like trying to keep it cool for Chris Brennan. Like, yeah, let's go for another hour. And inside I'm like pregnant and tired and dying.
Oh my.
And so it just felt like there was so many things that were kind of happening. Like I've got Saturn in the 10th house. So a lot of it is, career related for me. And then it's the exaltation lord of my 5th house of children. And so there's a lot that I always tell people, I'm like, don't sleep on the Libra house in your chart for Saturn return stuff because it's loud, so loud, especially if you're a day chart. And so, yeah, it's been a time. It's been very overwhelming and exhausting and also amazing. Like I feel like there's a lot of like I have a little bit of Saturn privilege because I've got a nice Jupiter in my chart ruling that Saturn, and so it's not all bad for me. And I feel really lucky that that's the case, but it's certainly like angular Saturn doing angular Saturn things.
Yes. Oh, I know.
Like I know very well actually.
Yeah, I think our stories are very similar for Saturn return because I too have Saturn in the 10th, and then I have like a stellium in mine's in Sagittarius, and then I have a stellium in Scorpio, and my sun just at the end of Libra. So it's like it was a lot of Saturn, and then
Yeah.
and then
You just don't get away from it. Like, everyone thinks like, oh, I get like 2.5 years of Saturn return. I'm like, Saturn's more insidious than you think, and you probably get like 5 to 7 years of Saturn in some way. Like even after this, even after my Saturn return ends, then I start my Saturn perfection years. And like I won't be free of Saturn for forever, but like especially in like an intense way for like 7.5 years. I find that's the case for most people in like some way, shape, or form. Like Saturn finds a way to get in there for longer than you would hope for.
Totally. Yeah, I had a similar then, because then I went into Capricorn, so it was like domicile, and then I was in Aquarius, which is my 12th house, and like at the same time I had an Aquarius. I had perfection years and Saturn signs leading up to this past year, and yeah, and now it's in my first house. So
Yeah, and squaring all your Scorpio stuff too when it's in Aquarius. So you just got all of
yeah,
that.
yeah, and now I'm in my Saturn square, and like I feel like I'm only just now really putting together the pieces. Like, what the fuck just happened for the past 10 years or something? But yeah.
Oh yeah, it's a lot. I mean, I kind of knew, the beauty, blessing, and curse of being an astrologer of like, I kind of knew I was going to get pregnant and I was just watching like everything. Everything was screaming it. If you looked at secondary progressions, it was screaming it. Zodiacal releasing, solar return chart, Saturn return chart had like a fifth house stellium or something. I like got a reading with Jessica Irene before my Saturn return started, or like right around the time it started. And she just like starts out the consultation. She's like, "So how do we feel about children?" And I was like, I know where this is going. It was very much that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's funny. It's hard to like, now that I have more experience, like when you see it coming and you're like, it could be like these five things. And like, I mean, there's always there's always surprises, but like, what one of these five things is it gonna be with like any big transit? And yeah, it's just interesting to watch it unfold right before your eyes.
Yeah, I know. I have this one friend that's like, "Don't you feel like knowing astrology just kind of takes the mystery out of life?" I'm like, "No, not at all." Because you still don't know until it happens. And even then, like you said, there's usually like five things it could be. You know the general vibe, and like, it might be this, might be that. Sometimes it's more obvious than others. Like I was fairly certain
Yeah.
about the kid thing. And yeah, and then it just like it happens and you're like, wow, I can't believe that happened like that, or I can't believe this one happened, but it ended up being like this, or it's always different when you live it. I don't think it takes the mystery out of life at all.
Right. It's kind of, I think this analogy gets used a lot of like knowing what the weather is going to be and like what kind of clothes to wear, but you don't really know what's going to happen when you walk out the door. It's just, there's still a lot up in the air, even though you might know what the weather is.
Yeah, it's the perfect analogy. That's why I get used so much because it's just like that's the best way to describe it. You can kind of prepare, kind of know. And
Mhm.
also maybe it says like maybe it's Apple weather that's always wrong and you like go out and then it starts and then it was a sunny day and it started raining and you're like, what? Like I wasn't expecting that. There's always like surprises and it's just interesting to watch it all unfold. I think there's something really magical about that process of seeing and charting the transits and then experiencing it in real time. And the felt experience is very different than the perceived experience before it happens.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, it kind of brings the focus, even though astrology is a lot of like forecasting and like looking forward and looking backwards too. It's still very much about like what is actually happening like in the moment, and that kind of like trumps everything else. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. I always tell people they're like, "Well, I thought it was going to be really bad, and am I missing something? Because it's not." And I'm like, "No, you're not missing anything. Your lived experience is always going to trump whatever a prediction is because you're living the transit right now. So your experience of that transit is the transit. It's not what the person thought it might be. That's a best educated guess based on X, Y, and Z. But the way that you're experiencing and living it right now is always going to be what it actually is, if that makes sense.
Mhm. Totally. So how has all of this changed your practice now that you've gone through the Saturn, or well, not done yet, but like, well, you're doing the thing, and like you said a little bit that it's, you've kind of been pushed out into like a new level of exposure, and but yeah, being a mom too, like how does that change
Yeah. I
everything?
think I think that becoming a mom changes my practice and I think I'm more careful now.
Mm.
I think before, like you see things and you really I think the times I get predictions wrong are because I want the best for the person. And
Mm.
so I see it in the best possible light. And I think like pre Saturn return, maybe there was like a little bit of hopeful, like naivete of like, it's all gonna be okay. And like this is gonna work out, or like this is gonna be like this. And I think, very Saturn, like there's a sobering of, what it don't give people false hope. Also like don't crush their dreams, which is a thin line to walk, right? Like it's better to be wrong, I think, than to, do harm to a client or tell them something that they're just gonna, because I've had that happen to me in consultations where like an astrologer will say something and then you pre-grieve for like a year or two, like waiting for the thing to happen. And I think that can be really damaging and harmful. I don't think that that helps anything. But I think now I'm a little more careful or like guarded with making a prediction, like just because I see it could happen. Like now I'm much more inclined to be like, could, could, there's a possibility. And also it could just mean that you're thinking about this thing a lot and you want it to happen a lot and it might not happen still. So there's a little bit, I think I hold back a little bit more, have like a bit more of a like quote unquote realistic perspective on things. Just like the Saturn thing, a little bit of like grain of salt with everything and, try to be a little bit more careful around in a way that I don't think it's not that I wasn't careful. I mean, you got a consult with me pre-Saturn return. I think you can hopefully attest to that. But
Yeah.
but in a way that like I, at least when I'm reflecting on my practice, that I try now to be a little bit more like, okay, let's anchor this in something that's not just hope but also reality, and that yeah, I don't know, I feel like that's making it sound like I didn't do that before, and I definitely did, but I think it's just a bit more sunk in now in a way that it wasn't pre-baby, pre-Saturn return, that kind of
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah. No, you definitely were careful. I mean, you have Saturn in the 10th, like
Yeah.
you even before your Saturn return, like you were very aware, but I can understand how it would change and deepen that sensitivity or something to what could happen. So
Yeah. It's like you just, just being like more careful around like, even like, it was so funny. I don't know if you experience this too, but I think it's like a universal astrologer thing that when you're going through something, you start getting a lot of clients that are going through similar things as you. So when I was pregnant, like I had so many people coming to me about when am I going to get pregnant, or, what is this going to happen? And there's so many times where it's like, there's a stellium in the 5th house of the solar return chart, and there's this one other thing, and you feel like there's the possibility, but then like counter, like, in retrospectively, I could see like maybe that's just you really trying for a baby or like really wanting that. And so I think I'm a bit more like careful around just being like, yeah, like it looks really good and it could look really good, but also to say like, and also this could just mean that you're very fixated on this topic rather than it's going to come to pass. Does that make sense?
totally. Yeah, I've had similar experiences a lot with I wasn't really related to what I was going through, but lots of friends like dating and like wondering if their like significant other is gonna like lock it down, or like if this is like a longer term commitment. And it's like, oh, like Saturn is transiting your Venus in like the 7th house, like it could be like
Yeah.
really could be, but it also really could be like not at all, or like the opposite. So
Break up.
yeah,
Yeah.
that it's hard. Like
It's
yeah.
yeah. It's hard when you want the best, or like that person personally or something, you like want to see it in the best possible light for them, because you want that for them, you want that happiness for them. And I think that's where I mess up the most. And I can own that as like, I just want the best for you. Like, sometimes it comes back to, bite me and I get it wrong, and that's okay. But, I think now I'm just a little bit more careful.
Yeah. Yeah, totally understand that.
Yeah.
What's like on the horizon for you? And not that like you need to have any or if it's like too early to say anything, but like what do you have a lot of
Yeah, I always have a project,
yeah.
it's like Saturn in the 10th thing. I'm always working on something.
Yeah.
I have something that I can't say much about, but I will tease that I have a collaboration coming with an astrologer that I love their work. I think they're one of the best astrologers around right now. And we're doing a really cool lecture with maybe some other things to look forward to with that. That's all I can say. I can't blow the surprise yet, but we're working on that. It's coming, you know, in the next couple of months, if everything goes according to plan. And so I'm really excited about that. And then I always have a problem about starting projects on void moons and then forgetting that I've started them and then coming back and being like, I have half a lecture done or something like, you know, so like I have half of a third house lecture done. I have half of a houses guidebook done. I have half of a whole astrology course like completely planned out. You know, it will all come in due time, but next things are that collaboration. Then after that, probably a guidebook on the houses is what I'm hoping to do. I can't stop writing guidebooks, you know, they're so
Yeah,
fun.
yeah, they're awesome too. They're just, it's so nice to have like a little pocket guide that's like ready made and gets right to it. I love them.
Yeah, I feel like it's nice because I don't feel one like it's a book, you know, like in my mind it's not a book. Like I'm not an author. I just can like write these little things and give them to people and be like, here you go, like this is what I've been working on. And it feels fun because I don't have to try to cover planets and signs and all of the things. Like it can be really succinct on one topic and be as long or as short as, you know, it wants to be. And I'm excited for the houses one. I've been wanting to do it for a long time, and I've kind of started working on some of the pieces for my Patreon page, and then those will get edited and crafted and, you know, all the things to bring it together. And then everyone wants a part 2 to my Zodiacal releasing lecture. So I know that's like ticking in the back of my brain of like, I got to do that too. So, you know, there's always more. Like I have like a list of 8 different projects on my phone right now of like, these are the next things that we'll get to when there's time, which there is not a lot of time right now, as I'm sure you can understand as a mom of 3. So when there's time, we'll keep chugging along, keep putting other things out. And yeah, there's no shortage of ideas.
Yeah, that's so exciting. Like speaking of time, I am excited. Eventually, I don't know when the time will be, but I really want to take your electional course. That looks awesome.
Yeah, thanks. That was a big part of the Saturn return. I think I released it when my Saturn return was exact. And it was, you know, big Saturn in the 10th moment of like, okay, here's like a big, you
Yeah.
know, piece of work. It's like, I don't know, 10 or 11 lectures or something like this. And I love electional astrology. And for people who don't know what it is, it's basically a way that you can select like beneficial times to start things. And I think that's one of the ways to use it. That's probably like the primary definition. But I think the beauty of electional astrology is it teaches you how present astrology is in every single moment in a way that you just can't get into when you're doing natal. It's very different. You know, like one of the things that I talk about a lot in the course is like, I want you to look at the chart of the moment all the time while you're taking the course. Don't do this after. Don't get obsessed with charts and like never do anything if the chart's not good. But start to feel like what is the texture of like the cosmic texture of this moment, and how does that then influence your experience of every and anything, you know? Like I can't tell you how many times I leave the house. And of course, like you have to do things with shitty charts. And so like I'll look at it and be like, oh man, like malefic ruling the 3rd house, or like South Node in the 3rd house. And then like I can't get a train home or something like this, and like have to take an Uber. And like there's just different ways that like, you know, 3rd house being transportation and stuff, like it just impacts every little thing in ways that you just you're not conscious of unless you're paying close attention. Bless you. Bless you.
Sorry.
Bless you. You're totally fine. But yeah, so it just gets you like in touch with like the cosmic rhythm in a way that I feel like natal astrology or even tracking transits doesn't do, because it removes you from it a lot. And just like, what does it mean when Mars is on the ascendant? Oh, like a loud noise outside woke me up, or burned my hand in the oven, or, you know, it's funny how it's in everything. And I think electoral astrology helps teach you that in a different way.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. I love looking at it that way, and like in the group chat being like, astrologer good. I just burned myself. Look at what yours is. Like it's like a way of reframing things too, that's like adds humor, or like, I don't know, just gives you more appreciation for sure, like you said, of the moment and what's going on in the sky.
Yeah. Yeah. And like it's the best way to convince anybody that astrology is real. You know what I mean? Like enough times of me telling my husband like, oh, this is gonna happen or this is gonna happen because, and then like the fifth time he's like, there's something to this. Like you're not wrong ever about this. Like, it's like it's funny to see like those little things can be so loud, in a way that someone telling you about your personality isn't. You know what I mean? Because a lot of astrology can feel super general to people, or, you could be like, oh, well, this could apply to, a like large number of people. But when it's like, oh, we're going to be late today because we're leaving now and not in 10 minutes, or which sounds weird, but it's true. Like if you have to wait for the rising sign to change, it might be the difference between you hitting traffic and missing traffic, or just like different things like that. And it starts to really feel like it's integrating into your bones when you do, electional, or then horary is a whole different thing. It's cool to learn different branches. And I think electional is the one that just like, besides natal, really, really grabbed me. And it's been so fun to teach. I taught it one-on-one with like a couple people before I opened the course. And now to see people turning in like their final assignments and seeing what charts they pick, it's just so cool. I love it.
That's awesome. Yeah. Do you find it harder now, like having less time? Like, do you just kind of have to work with less with elections and more just with whatever you get? Is that?
Yeah, yeah, nowadays for sure, there's not so much there's less flexibility. But I think the beauty of the day and age that we live in is that at least for like business stuff, everything can be programmed, like Instagram posts, you can schedule ahead of time, emails, all of these things. So if it's ever business related, I'm definitely I elect every Instagram post, you know what I mean? Like, which is probably aggressive, but it doesn't take as long as it sounds. Like, it's just a quick 2-minute look at the chart and be like, oh, this is the best one. We'll just do it at this time, even if it's bad, or this just highlights the planet that I'm talking about. So I'm going to, put this planet on an angle or something like that to kind of give them their moment in the sun. And yeah, but nowadays, obviously for like personal stuff, you're just like, like still like I had to sign like my daughter up for daycare the other day, and I was just looking at these charts with Mars and Cancer, and I was like, I really don't want to sign like the papers right now, but I was like, we'll just get Jupiter applying to an angle and like pray.
Well, and sometimes it's just like stating like what you already know, like Mars and Cancer, like inflammation of like children, like she's gonna get sick. Like she's gonna get sick when she goes to daycare, and it's inevitable. And even if you didn't know astrology, like you would know that. And it sucks, but like sure, I don't know.
It's just descriptive. Yeah, it's like when this is what's happening, you're like, I guess that is what's happening. Like we go with it anyway. But when you can use it, especially for big stuff, like I always try to elect like vacations, for example. That's a big one where you think, like, oh, just do whatever flight time. Like it's the one that like my husband will listen to me on. He's like, all right, we can leave an hour early or 2 hours early and sit in the airport if it gets the better chart, because it's made a really big difference in our travel experiences and stuff like that. So things like bigger things, it's always nice to be able to elect for, and the smaller things, we do what we can. And also, it's not life to have a perfect experience all the time anyway. And there are no perfect charts, but part of it is also what does happen when I leave, when like Mars is on an angle. Every time I'm late and I'm rushing, like trying to run to a train or something like this. And it's always like that. Or it's just funny. You just have to laugh. And sometimes of year, like you have certain rising signs rising at different times. So if you're always leaving your house at the same time to like, go to the grocery store, like do whatever, take the kids to drop off, like all of those things, like you're hitting that same thing. And it can explain why, oh, these, like this month was just like really hard. And it's like, yeah, because that was when, Scorpio was rising at the time that you left every day, versus like it might go smoother. It's just like a really interesting way to get into a relationship with time that feels supportive rather than, restrictive.
Totally. Yeah, I love that, just that phrasing, like how you said that. It's like astrology, like a relationship with time.
Yeah, exactly. And I think electional does that really, really well. But are you still in Adam's courses?
I have finished year two, and now I'm actually taking classes with Britton LaRue. I don't know if you're familiar.
Cool. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I saw her on the astrology podcast and followed her stuff. I like her vibe is great.
Yeah, yeah, it's getting more. I'm in her moon to moon class right now, and also her Scorpio class called Cave Space. And yeah, it's a lot more just like feeling into the vibes versus like the technical, which I think is really helpful for me because I'm kind of lean in like the technical and like push myself there, but like could really use just some like vibe type work. So I don't know if that's a good description, but it's really cool. There's like a lot of stuff about inner child healing and like the moon, it's a moon class.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm enjoying.
We all need the moon class right now with Mars and Cancer, you know what I mean? Like it's a really good time to get in touch with the moon. No, I feel like it's so true. You have to like balance technique with vibes, like the perfect astrology blends the two instead of has just does one or just does the other, you kind of have to have both, I think.
Totally. Do you still take classes? Do you like dabble in different things? I'm sure not that you have like a lot of time to do that right now,
Right
but
now.
zero pressure.
Yeah, I haven't for a while. Like during the Saturn return in particular, it just felt like there was not like there's always something to work on or something to do that feels like I don't get a lot of time to just learn. But I've been learning horary
Mhm.
now. I kind of got like the juice back to be like, I want to learn something new, and so I started when I wasn't working on any projects, and now I'm kind of like falling off because I have all these other things to do. And time is of the essence these days. But I'm loving learning horary astrology. Like it's so cool. And it's something that I've kind of like danced around for a long time and kind of like I've read some books and like I could kind of look at a horary and be like, I think it's this, but without any level of confidence. And now I'm getting into like Frawley and really trying to like be able to do it, and like starting to cast charts for myself and answer questions. And I had such a cool experience when like the first time I did a horary for another person, just like a friend who was they were buying a house and they were like, "Oh, am I going to get the house?" And so I did the horary. I was like, "Feels like yes," and we went back and forth with it and I was like, "I really think you're going to get the house." And then but there was like something in the chart that was like blocking it, but then it felt like it happens after the fact. And it ended up being that they were not originally offered the house. They offered it to another person. And then those people, it fell through with them. So then they did get the house in the end. And they came back around. They were like, I can't believe like you got that right. Like I did get the house. I was just like, Horary, so cool, man. Like, I can't believe you can see that stuff, because you could see like in a natal chart or solar return, like, oh, it looks like you're moving this year and things like that. But am I going to get the offer on this? Am I going to get this house that I just put an offer on? It'd be so hard to answer with natal, and it's one of those things that horary is just so primed for. And so I'm excited to just keep practicing and get better. And ideally be able to use it in client consultations because I think that's something that like Adam Ellenboss does that I think is really cool that, if you have a question in a natal consult that you feel like would be better suited for horary, you just cast a horary, just do it
Yeah.
right there. And I'm like, I really want that technique in my little toolkit.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I'm learning right now and kind of focusing on. And it's like revivified my love of astrology.
That's awesome. Yeah, I have some friends actually taking Adam's class in the group chat, so we like get to practice often, or I get to ask them practice questions, and it's crazy, like the level of nuance. Like you said, like there was something I asked, and they were like, "Yeah, I think it's gonna happen, but like it might be later than you think, or something." And I don't know, just it's not just yes or no. It's like you can really get some details in there.
Yeah. Yeah, it like tells the whole story of what's happening in a way that you wouldn't expect it to almost,
Yeah.
like you would kind of think, oh, this is very cut and dry and because it's kind of designed for yes, no questions, but it's cut and dry, and it also gives you a whole lot of like surrounding information that it can be really useful or really helpful for figuring different things out. And now I'm like, wow, this is, yeah, just like an amazing like tool to have, and I don't know how I went this long without learning it, but it's fun to have a whole new branch to dive into. And I feel like that's the beauty of astrology, is there's always something else to learn, like you're never done.
Yeah, I think that's like one of my favorite things about it too. It's just forever student.
Yeah. There's a reason it's like a ninth house thing, it's like it's the eternal student thing. You spend your whole life and would never learn everything that there is to learn.
Yep. It can be daunting, but it's also like, I don't know, I love that. Yeah, it ebbs and flows. You come back to it. Like, you have busier times where you can't dedicate as much time to it, but it's always there. It's always like, there's always something new. There's always a new way of looking at, like, even just like, I've spent a lot of time thinking about the theme of Mundi, and like, you can just go so many places with really basic concepts, and I don't know, it's just infinite. But
it's so fun to do that, because even I find like sometimes I'll go back and listen to like very basic or like beginner lectures, but from a different, teacher, and how much you can get out of hearing someone describe something in a certain way. Like I saw a post the other day that was talking about how Austin Coppock once described sect and like planets that are in, of the other sect that are still strong. And it just like blew my mind. I was like, this is so good. They were talking about how like they were basically summarizing what Austin said, and they were like, it's, like day chart versus night chart. Like you can think about them as like Taco Bell shift managers, and how like this is so good, right? Like how like the day shift manager is really good at like doing your lunch rush, but like the night shift manager has to like be able to handle like the rowdy people who are trying to like take a shit in the in the Taco Bell like dining room, and how you might be really good at like running a lunch rush, but you like cannot deal with that chaos. And like just the way that this person described or conveyed like what Austin's point was, I was like thinking about sect in a whole new way. And I was like, wow, this is so interesting. And I feel like going back to concepts that you think you have down, but like from a different teacher, can also just offer you a whole new lens into how to interpret that, or, even for your own chart, like what that means, or in an election or anything like that. It just gives you so much, it's like you could just go back to basics for your whole life and you'd still get so much out of it,
Totally. Well, on that note, I think we are nearing the end of our time. Do you want to plug again, like what you have available and where we can find your work?
Sure. I feel like this whole thing was like a plug for my work. So thanks for.
No, that's okay. I'm happy to do it.
It was like hyping up all the various things that I have. But yeah, you can find everything on my website, KiraRyberg.com. I've got guidebooks on the lots and decans and bounds, and I have a beginner's guide to traditional astrology called the Baby Astro Guidebook. I've got lectures on a whole variety of things, and I have the electional astrology course and more stuff coming, and my patron page if you like just tons and tons of very wordy articles about all of the things. So there's something for everybody, basically, is what I try to do. So yeah, you can find all of that on my website.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Kira. It was so great getting to chat with you. Yeah, I just appreciate you, and thanks for sharing so much about your work today.
Thanks for having me on. It was an honor, and hopefully we'll get to do it again someday.
Yes, let's do it. All right. Talk to you soon. You can book a reading with Kira, purchase any of her guidebooks or her classes at KiraRyberg.com. Kira also shares very freely and generously on both Instagram and Twitter. You can find her at Kira Astrology with 2 Y's on Instagram and Kira Astrology with 1 Y on Twitter. For more information about my work, you can find me at byjoveastrology.com, on Instagram at byjoveastro, and on Twitter at byjoveastrology.